hospital's creepy security guy locked me in a room with him. This happened about 12 years ago. I was 14 or 15 years old. I was traveling with my mom and dad, brother and sister-in-law. We went visiting mom's brother and sister, who live in the far countryside, a minuscule town in an agricultural centered state. After a day and a half on the road, we finally got there. Soon my brother, sister-in-law, a cousin and I went to take a walk. We ended up playing soccer in an improvised field near my aunt's house, and as sure as it would happen to any city boy playing in the country, I got hurt, tripping over a piece of old machinery next to the field. The next day, I woke up feeling like shit. Aside from the bruises, I was feeling very weak and nauseated. My mom checked my temperature and realized I was burning with fever. My country has a public health system, but many times it looks better on paper than it works in reality. Supposedly, there should be medical treatment available to everyone. This town was in the middle of nowhere, miles upon miles of nothing but soy plantation to every direction you looked, a day's ride distant from any medium-sized cities, but it had a little hospital, a health center, if you will. Mom, dad and my uncle took me there, but there was no doctor to see me. The only people there apparently were the lady in the small reception desk and a guy who was sitting next to her, whom I later learned was hired as a kind of security guard. He was not an actual guard from a security company or police organization, just a bulky guy with a grumpy face. Over an hour passed, and they made no motion of calling the doctor or anything of the sort, just kept telling us to wait. I was in a really bad shape, finding it difficult to keep from collapsing from the chair to the ground, so, I'll admit, I began to get a little snappy. I recall whimpering "let's just go," they didn't even call a doctor, and things of the sort, as the adults patiently waited. Full stop. I understand them. It was a long ride to the hospital. It could be worth it to wait another hour or so if it meant not having to go all the way back to my uncle and aunt's farm and then back to town again, in case I didn't get better. Unfortunately, the security guy was not so patient. At a given moment, he stood up and motioned me to a room to the side of the entrance hall. "Come," he said. I followed him through a door into a room with a small corridor. He locked the door behind us, almost slamming it in Dad's face, and then sat on a chair in the end of the corridor. "Sit," he pointed to a hospital bed next to him. "While lock the door?" I asked as I climbed up the bed. At that moment, looking to the side, I could see the rest of the room. There was a sole nurse, fully immersed in administering a huge injection in an unconscious patient, right next to me. He didn't answer me. I realized I was in this weird freaking town in the middle of nowhere, locked in a room with an unconscious guy, an unaware nurse, and this brute who was staring me down with a not pleased at all face. I got a sudden rush of adrenaline, shaking off a bit of the weakness from the fever. "Sit there, lie down," he insisted, angrily. I didn't get it. He looked furious. Again, I recall complaining, but all of this seemed uncalled for. He looked ready to beat me up. Someone was knocking very loudly on the door. I took my decision. I raced to the door the fastest I could and unlocked it. I barely had time to pull the door handle before the guy got to me and grabbed my arm, pulling me back and trying to shut the door again. Luckily, my uncle was at the other side. He stopped the door from closing with his body, pushed it open, and pulled me out. I don't recall much of what happened after that. There was discussion, shouting, and we finally went back to my uncle's house, where I spent the rest of the trip resting my fever off. I still don't get what made him get so angry, or what he intended to do to me. Maybe he just wanted to frighten off an annoying teenage boy, and he didn't fail at that. It's been a long time, but I just realized my hands are shaking after writing this. My uncle came to visit us, years later, and told me that guy got fired and left town after that. I hope he did. Let's not meet again. Creepy old man at the library. This encounter happened about 2 years ago when my husband at the time and I went to the local library to apply for passports for trip abroad. I live in a large city, so there was a fairly long queue for passports. We sat and waited a bit on some benches sort of towards the back of the library and chit-chatted a bit until an old man with a blotchy red skin walked up, smiling, and out of nowhere asked, "Hey, are you teenagers?" I was 28 at the time and my ex was 29, but I, at least, have always been told I look younger than I am. In addition to that, my ex always wore graphic tees, in this instance a Pokemon tee, and jeans. I often wear colorful cutesy clothes, in this instance a pink button-up dress shirt with a red heart pattern all over it. I laughed and cheerily responded, "No, we're nearly 30 at this." His face instantly fell, and he walked off in the direction of the children's book section. Taken aback, my ex and I looked at each other, processing the strange interaction. We shortly walked around for a few minutes, the whole time with me gradually getting more and more uneasy. I decided to tell one of the librarians what just happened. As I told her, she looked concerned, especially when I told her which direction he headed off in afterwards. She thanked me for telling her and said she would handle it. So, creepy old man at the library, let's not meet. Though I guess you're probably thinking the same thing since I'm not a teenager. Ick. Please unsubscribe.